بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم نحمده ونصلي ونسلم على رسوله الكريم أما بعد باب جواز الشرب من جميع الأواني الطاهرة غير الذهب والفضة وجواز الكرع وهو الشرب بالفم من النهر وغيره بغير إناء ولا يد وتحريم استعمال إناء الذهب والفضة في الشرب والأكل والطهارة وسائر وجوه الاستعمال. In this new chapter that Imam Nawawi rahmatullahi alayhi has brought, Imam Nawawi rahmatullahi alayhi wants to mention three masail. The first mas'ala being that when it comes to eating or drinking from any utensil, then it is permissible to eat or drink from any utensil which is clean, does not have any impurity, as long as it is not a utensil made of gold or silver. If an individual eats from any utensil, that utensil is not made of gold or silver, he is drinking from a utensil, a cup, it's not made from gold and silver, and it's clean, there's no impurity, then it is permissible for him. If a utensil is made of gold or silver, the plate it's made of gold or silver, it will not be permissible for that individual to eat from that plate. The cup is made from gold or silver, it will now not be permissible for that individual to drink from that glass, from that cup, from that utensil. This hukam, this mas'ala is for both men and women. So whether it's a male, whether it's a female, as long as he believes in Allah and His Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, it is not permissible for him to use a utensil which is made of gold or silver to drink or to eat from that utensil. So the first mas'ala Imam Nawawi rahmatullahi alayhi brings here is this: Babu jawaz shurbi min jami'il awani at-tahira. The bab and the chapter which states that it's permissible to drink from all clean utensils, غَيْرِ الذَّهَبِ وَالْفِضَّةِ, as long as they're not utensils made of gold or silver. The second mas'ala Imam Nawawi rahmatullahi alayhi brings is وَجَوَازِ الْقَرْعِ, the permissibility of qara'. And what is qara'? Imam Nawawi rahmatullahi alayhi himself explains, وَهُوَ الشُّرُبُ بِالْفَمِ مِنَ النَّهْرِ وَغَيْرِهِ بِغَيْرِ إِنَاءٍ وَلَا يَدٍ. It's to drink directly from the mouth, using the mouth, from a river or a stream or a utensil, without using your hands and without using any utensil. Now, why will an individual do this? There could be many reasons. For example, an individual, he's walking, he's in safar, he's traveling, and there is najasat on his hands, and he also doesn't have a utensil with him. Now he's walking and there's a river there, there's a stream there, and he needs to drink water. So he has two options. He can get rid of the najasa, he can wash his hands and then use his hands to drink. And the second option is that if he's really thirsty and he needs to drink water, he's allowed to drink water directly using his mouth. Babu jawazil kar'i. Another reason that why this is permissible is we need to go back into the time of our beloved Prophet alayhi salatu wassalam. And not just back in the time then, but even in today's time, when you look at those countries in which the temperature is very hot, it gets very hot, the weather gets very hot. What happens there is that the water in the rivers and the stream, they also get hot. And an individual, if he's outside for a long time, his hands also become hot. So if he was to get water in his hands, if he doesn't have a utensil, he's to take water in his hands, the water will become more hot because of the heat of his hands. And if he's thirsty, then using that water, it won't quench his thirst because it's hot water. So another method would be to drink directly using an individual's mouth without using their hands or any other utensil. Khair, Imam Nawawi rahmatullahi alayhi, he brings that masala over here, ke babu وَجَوَازِ الْكَرْعِ, that it is permissible to do kara'. And what is kara'? وَهُوَ الشُّرْبُ بِالْفَمِ, that to drink directly using the mouth, مِنَ النَّهْرِ وَغَيْرِهِ, from a river or from a stream, بِغَيْرِ إِنَاءٍ وَلَا يَدٍ, without using your hands or without using any utensil. Now, Imam Nawawi rahmatullahi alayhi, why does he mention this mas'ala? Because when a person does this and he drinks directly using his mouth, then there's mushabaha and with animals. That's how animals drink. They don't use their hands, they don't use utensils. They drink directly using their mouth. So it's possible that it's impermissible. So the reason Imam Nawawi rahmatullahi alayhi mentions this mas'ala over here and brings a hadith later on to prove it, is that despite there is some mushabaha in times of darura, in times of necessity, when a person doesn't have a utensil or there's najasa on his hands, at that time it will be permissible and a person can drink directly like this using his mouth. And the third mas'ala Imam Nawawi rahmatullahi alayhi brings is وَتَحْرِيمِ إِسْتِعْمَالِ إِنَاءِ الذَّهَبِ وَالْفِضَّةِ, that it is impermissible to use a utensil made of gold, wal-fidda, and silver. For what reason? Fi shurbi, for drinking. So like I mentioned earlier, that if a person wants to drink from any utensil, he can drink as long as it's clean, but he can't use a utensil made of gold for this or silver. In the same manner, wal-akli, for eating, he cannot use a utensil, a plate made of gold or silver. It's impermissible. Wat-taharati, for cleanliness. A person wants to make wudu and he has a utensil but it's made of gold, so he can't put water into that utensil made of gold and then make wudu from that. It's impermissible. Or he has a big bucket, a bigger utensil which is made of gold. Now he can't put water in that and then use that to make ghusl. No, it will be impermissible. To use a utensil made of gold or silver for cleanliness also, it is impermissible. A person wants to wash his clothes, and to wash his clothes he has a big bucket, again it's made of gold or it's made of silver, and he's putting water in that and then he's using that to wash his clothes. This will also be impermissible. So Imam Nawawi rahmatullahi alayhi mentions that it's impermissible to use utensils made of gold or silver for eating, for drinking, for cleanliness, and wasa'iri wujuhil isti'mal. In the end, he mentions, for any reason, it will be impermissible. You're not allowed to use utensils made of gold or silver for any reason. It's impermissible for both males and females. For men and women alike is this mas'ala. Now, to prove all these three masail, Imam Nawawi rahmatullahi alayhi brings some ahadith and some prophetic statements of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam here, and some incidents from the life of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. The first incident he mentions and hadith he mentions is an Anas radiyallahu ta'ala anhu قال حضرت الصلاة. This hadith, it's mentioned on the authority of Anas radiyallahu ta'ala anhu. And he's mentioning an incident that took place in the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that the Sahaba radiyallahu ta'ala anhum and the Prophet ﷺ all were gathered at a place near Masjid al-Nabawi. And what happened when they were gathered? حضرت الصلاة. While the majlis was going on, it so happened that the time of salah came. It was the time of salah now. فَقَامَ مَنْ كَانَ قَرِيبَ الدَّارِ إِلَىٰ أَهْلِ. Now when the time of salah comes, the first thing every individual does is they start worrying about making wudu. Even in the gatherings of our elders, we will see that when an individual, he's sitting, but the time for salah is coming close, and he knows that if I continue sitting, then I will have to miss 1 rakat, 2 rakats, or 3 rakats. If I don't make wudu right now, then with adab, with lots of respect, they stand up and they go to make wudu so that they don't miss their salah. In the same manner, the majlis of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was taking place. The Sahaba radiyallahu ta'ala anhum are present, and Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is present. Hadarat is-salah, the time of salah comes. And now because it's the time of salah, everyone is worried about making their wudu. So what happens? فَقَامَ مَنْ كَانَ قَرِيبَ الدَّارِ إِلَىٰ أَهْلِهِ. Those individuals whose houses were nearby, they got up and went to their houses. Why? To make wudu. Because their houses were nearby, not very far. So they decided that let us go to our house, make wudu, and then come back for salah. فَقَامَ مَنْ كَانَ قَرِيبَ الدَّارِ إِلَىٰ أَهْلِهِ. But what happened? وَبَقِيَ قَوْمٌ. But a group of individuals, they stayed back with Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. What was the reason they stayed back? Two reasons. Either those group of individuals, one group of them that stayed back were those individuals whose houses were very far. So 1 kilometer, 1.5 kilometer, 2 kilometers away from where they were seated. If they were to go back home to make wudu, then they would miss out on their salah. So that group of individuals, they also decided to stay back, whoever's house was far away. And the khuddam of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, those that were very close to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and used to do his khidmah, the likes of Abu Bakr radiallahu an, Anas radiallahu an, who's mentioning this incident himself, they also stayed back to do khidmah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So a group of individuals, they stayed back, وَبَقِيَ قَوْمٌ, and they decided that when it's time for wudu, when Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam will make wudu, we'll also make our arrangement for wudu. So what happens now? فَأُتِيَ رَسُولُ اللَّهِ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَسَلَّمَ بِمِخْضَبٍ مِّنْ حِجَارَةٍ. So a utensil made of stone was brought to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. فَأُتِيَ, it was brought to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now it's possible Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that it's time for wudu, I need to make wudu, someone bring water, and then someone brought this. Or it's possible the khuddam themselves, they understood that now it's time for salah. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam would want to make wudu, so before he asked, they presented the vessel with water. So it comes in the hadith, the words of Anas radiallahu an are that بِمِخْضَبٍ مِّنْ حِجَارَةٍ, that a utensil, a vessel made of stone was brought to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now mikhdab in the Arabic language is a vessel, a utensil, but it could be in 3 sizes. The first size is, like you can say in our times, we have bathtubs. So you know how wide is a bathtub and how deep is it? Not very deep, but longer in width. So a mikhdab, it's longer in width, but it's not very deep. So one size is the size of a bathtub. In that time, of course, they didn't have drains like that. So they would fill that entire bucket or that tub with water, and then they would use the water in there to make wudu. So one size is the size of a bathtub, long in width, less in depth also. The second size is slightly smaller. Many of us that are here, they know in our homes, the women folk, they wash gosht or meat. So the tub that they use, it's not very big. It's smaller, much smaller in size, and not very deep also. Again, so that size of a tub, that is also known as mikhdab, but it's much smaller than the first one. And the third size of a mikhdab is even smaller, the size of a tray, you can say, in our time. So how wide would a tray be? Not very wide, and again, not very deep. So what size was this mikhdab and this vessel that was brought to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam? We learn from the words of Anas radiallahu anhu ahead, فَصَغُرَ الْمِخْضَبُ أَنْ يَبْسُطَ فِيهِ كَفَّهُ. This utensil was so small that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam could not even expand his palm and his entire hand in that vessel, in that utensil. You can imagine that how small that utensil must be. Not very deep. He can't even fit his entire hand in there. Only his fingers are going. His entire hand is not even being able to spread in that utensil. In the riwayah that is coming ahead, which is narrated on the authority of Imam, which is narrated by Imam Muslim rahmatullahi alayhi, the words of the hadith are فَأُتِيَ بِقَدَحٍ رَحْرَاحٍ, that he was brought with a vessel which was shallow, again not very deep. So this utensil that was brought to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, so that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam could make wudu from it, there was very less water in it, and this utensil was so small that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam's hand would not even expand in it. Now, فَتَوَضَّأَ الْقَوْمُ كُلُّهُ, despite the vessel being so small and such less water being in it, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, because he couldn't fit his entire hand, he placed his fingers in it. And this was, when he placed his fingers, there was barakah. And due to that barakah, فَتَوَضَّأَ الْقَوْمُ كُلُّهُمْ, everyone there they were able to make wudu from that water. So it's a mu'jiza, a miracle of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that from such a small amount of water, every single individual in that gathering, they were able to make wudu. فَتَوَضَّأَ الْقَوْمُ كُلُّهُمْ قَالُوا كَمْ كُنْتُمْ. So when Anas radiallahu ta'ala anhu, he mentioned this incident to his students asked, Kam kuntum? How many individuals were you? How many people made wudu? How many people were present? So Anas radiallahu anhu, he said, Thamanina wa ziyada, 80 plus, more than 80, 80 and more. Thamanina wa ziyada, more than 80. Now the same incident is mentioned by Imam Muslim rahmatullahi alayh, but with a bit of variation. And when we look at that riwayah also, we learn more from this hadith. What is that riwayah? وَفِي رِوَايَةٍ لَهُ وَلِمُسْلِمٍ رَحِمَهُمَ اللَّهُ تَعَالَى أَنَّ النَّبِيَّ صَلَى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَسَلَّمَ دَعَا بِإِنَاءٍ مِّن مَّاءٍ. That Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he requested, he asked for a utensil that has water in it. So of course it was time for wudu. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam must have asked for a utensil with water to be brought to make wudu. فَأُتِيَ بِقَدَحٍ رَحْرَاحٍ فِيهِ شَيْءٌ مِّن مَّاءٍ. So he was brought with a shallow vessel. A shallow vessel was brought to him. فِيهِ شَيْءٌ مِّن مَّاءٍ. There was only a bit of water in it. Slightly some water in that vessel because it was very shallow, not too deep. فَوَضَعَ أَصَابِعَهُ فِيهِ. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam placed his fingers inside that. Of course, we learned from the previous hadith, his entire hand would not fit. So he only placed his fingers inside. قال أنس رضي الله تعالى عنه. Anas radiallahu ta'ala anhu, he mentions, فَجَعَلْتُ أَنظُرُ إِلَى الْمَاءِ يَنْبُعُ مِنْ بَيْنِ أَصَابِعِهِ. Subhanallah. Look at Anas radiallahu ta'ala anhu, he mentions that I saw water sprouting from the fingers of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. فحذرت من توضأ ما بين السبعين إلى الثمانين. Now Anas radiallahu ta'ala himself mentions in this hadith, I estimated the individuals that made wudu, and I estimated them to be from between 70 and 80 in number. Now the first thing that we need to understand is that when we look at this narration, Anas radiallahu ta'ala mentions there were approximately 70 to 80 people. In the other narration, he says 80 plus. Now this is in reality no real ikhtilaf. This is very easy to understand that an individual, Anas radiallahu ta'ala anhu, mentioned this as an estimation. That he estimated and he came to this, someone asked him, he said 70 to 80 at one time. At another time he mentioned that around 80 or a bit over 80, 80 plus. So this is not in reality some ikhtilaf, he's just estimating. And it's possible, some muhaddithin have mentioned, that no, first he estimated, and then because this mu'jiza and this miracle occurred, so so Anas radiallahu anhu, he counted the numbers of individuals, and first he thought they were in between 70 and 80, and then he counted them to be a bit over 80. So first he mentioned 70 to 80, and then when he actually counted, he said they were a bit over 80. So this is also possible. The second thing that we understand from this hadith, Anas radiallahu ta'ala anhu, he mentions, فَجَعَلْتُ أَنظُرُ إِلَى الْمَاءِ يَنْبُعُ مِنْ بَيْنِ أَصَابِعِهِ. I saw water sprouting from the fingers of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. There are two groups of muhaddithin in here also. But before we move on to that, one thing I would like to mention, that the number itself, that the 80 plus individuals or 70 to 80 individuals that were present and made wudu, who were they? Were they all the individuals, meaning only the individuals present there that stayed back? Or were they also the individuals that went home and came back? So in this, there are also two groups of muhaddithin. One group of muhaddithin, they mentioned that the 80 plus people that made wudu, they were only the people that stayed back. Otherwise the rest, they went home. They didn't come back and they weren't able to make wudu from that water. But the people that made wudu from that water, they were the 80 individuals that stayed back with Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And the second group of muhaddithin mentioned that no, in total there were 80 plus individuals, and all the people that made wudu were in total everyone. So even first, those that were present, they made wudu. Then the individuals that were home, someone must have told them, and this word quickly spread that a mu'jiza and a miracle has occurred. So everyone that went home, they also came back so that they could make wudu from the water that was sprouting from the blessed fingers of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So the 80 in number, according to one group of muhaddithin, are only the people that stayed back, and according to another group of muhaddithin are all the individuals. Those that were there and those that also went home, they also came back to make wudu. Now, the other thing we learn from this hadith, فَجَعَلْتُ أَنظُرُ إِلَى الْمَاءِ يَنْبُعُ مِنْ بَيْنِ أَصَابِعِ. Anas radiallahu anhu, he mentions that I saw water sprouting from the fingers of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. In this, there's also two groups of muhaddithin, and the muhaddithin are of two opinions. One group of muhaddithin, they mention that in reality, the water was coming out from the water, not from the fingers of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. So the water was coming out from the water, not from the fingers of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. And just like you have water, when it boils, what happens? Then it will come out with lots of force. So because the vessel was very small and the water was being created from the water, lots of water was coming out of that vessel. And the fingers of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, because they were in the vessel, if the person that was looking, it looked like to that individual, the water was sprouting from the fingers of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but in reality, they were not sprouting from the fingers of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They were actually coming out from the water itself. Allah is qadir mutlaq. Allah has power to do anything. So when Allah has the power to take out water from the earth, when Allah has the power to let water descend from the heavens, then Allah also has that power to take out water from water itself. So this is according to one group of muhaddithin, that the water was actually coming out of the water and it looked like it was coming out of the fingers of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. According to the second group of muhaddithin, and the jamhur, the majority of the muhaddithin are of this opinion, and the muhaqqiqeen, they are also of this opinion, that no, in reality the water was actually sprouting from the fingers of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The water was actually coming out from the fingers of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and Allah created that ta'thir and that effect in the fingers of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that they could produce water and water would come out. Just like Allah has given ta'thir to the earth, that water can come out of the earth, to the clouds, to the heavens, the water can descend. In the same manner, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave ta'thir to the fingers of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and water would come out, was coming out from the fingers of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. If we take this second opinion of the muhaddithin, of the jamhur, of the majority of the muhaddithin, then this water that came out from the fingers of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, this is more virtuous and afdal than the water of Zamzam. Now when it comes to the water of Zamzam, first and foremost we need to understand that the water of Zamzam, I mentioned this before, the water of Zamzam is the most virtuous water. From all the waters, from the time of Adam alayhi salatu wasalam till the end of times, from the water of this dunya, from the water of the akhirah, all the waters put together, the most virtuous water is the water of Zamzam. And what is the dalil for that? The ulama are unanimous. All the ulama are unanimous that the most virtuous water is Zamzam. And what is the dalil and the evidence for that? We find in the hadith that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when he went for Mi'raj, then Jibreel and Mikail alayhi salatu wasalam came to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And to cut the incident short, they took Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam to a place, and over there they took out the heart of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and they washed the heart of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam with the water of Zamzam. And they brought a tray from the heavens that was full of iman and hikmah, faith and wisdom. And they filled this iman and wisdom in the heart of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. When the ulama and the scholars of hadith, they look at this hadith, they mention that who is coming to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam to wash his heart? Angels are descending from the heavens. And who? The greatest angels. The leader of the angels, Jibreel alayhi salatu wasalam, and he's with Mikail alayhi salatu wasalam, another great angel. And whose heart is being washed? The heart of Sayyidul Mursaleen, Muhammadur Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, the greatest individual to walk on the surface of this earth. And what water is being used? The water of Zamzam. The ulama and the scholars, they mention that if any water was more virtuous than the water of Zamzam, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala definitely would have sent that water with Jibreel and Mikail alayhi salatu wasalam to wash the heart of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. But He didn't do so. He sent with Jibreel and Mikail alayhi salatu wasalam the water of Zamzam. This shows us the virtue of the water of Zamzam and how virtuous the water of Zamzam is. And I like to mention this on the side also, that nowadays, because the water of Zamzam, it's available very frequently in large quantities to us. We want to buy Zamzam, we can go to a store, an Islamic store, and we'll be able to get Zamzam in large quantities if we want. Sometimes because of this, we take it to be not very valuable. We don't understand its value and how virtuous this water of Zamzam is. Whereas I've mentioned the hadith before, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam mentions that a differentiating factor between the mu'mineen and the munafiqeen is that a mu'min, he understands the value. And what does he do? He drinks Zamzam water to his full. And a munafiq, he doesn't drink Zamzam water to his full. Why? Because a mu'min understands the value of Zamzam. This is a sign of iman, that he has love for Zamzam water, he has value for Zamzam water, and he drinks Zamzam water to his full. And a sign of nifaq and hypocrisy is that he doesn't have love for Zamzam water. He doesn't understand its value. He doesn't have value for Zamzam water. And he doesn't drink Zamzam water to his fill. So the water of Zamzam, according to all the ulama, is the most virtuous. But if the water in this incident came out of the fingers of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, then this water is more virtuous. And how lucky are those Sahaba radiallahu ta'ala anhum, and how fortunate are those individuals who were there in the company of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and they were able to make wudu from this water. No one can have this chance again in this lifetime, that they make wudu from the water which comes out of the blessed body of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So the water of Zamzam, it's the most virtuous. But one thing we need to understand, that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, his wujud and his existence, it's more virtuous than Zamzam. Now when his wujud and his existence is more virtuous than Zamzam, then you can imagine that the water that comes out, how virtuous that must be. How much more virtuous it is than Zamzam, only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. Khair, we learn from this hadith that these Sahaba radiallahu ta'ala anhu, they were fortunate enough that they were able to drink, they were able to make wudu from this water that came out of the blessed fingers of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Now why did Imam Nawawi rahmatullahi alayhi bring this hadith? The reason is to show us that Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, he made wudu from a utensil which was made of stone. This shows us, Imam Nawawi rahmatullahi alayhi mentioned, it's permissible to use all pure utensils as long as they're not made of gold and silver. This was made of stone. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam used it. He has shown us that it is permissible to use this. One last hadith we'll go through, very short hadith in the same mas'ala. وعن عبد الله بن زيد رضي الله تعالى عنه قال أتانا النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم فأخرجنا له ماء في تور من صفر فتوضأ رواه البخاري رحمه الله تعالى. The hadith mentioned on the authority of Abdullah ibn Zayd radiallahu anhu, he mentions that Nabi Kareem sallallahu alayhi wasallam came to us. So we took out for him water fi tawrim min sufrin, in a vessel made of brass or copper. Fatawadda, so Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, he made wudu from this vessel. Once again, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam showed us that it's permissible to use a vessel which is not made of gold and silver. This vessel was made of copper or brass. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us all the ability to understand these hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow us all to act upon these masail those things that are permissible for us. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us the tawfiq to carry out those actions which are permissible and that gain us the pleasure of Allah and His Rasul sallallahu alayhi wasallam, and those acts which are impermissible. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us all the tawfiq and the divine ability to stay away from such impermissible actions. Ameen. Wa akhiru da'wana alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Wa sallallahu wa sallim ala sayyidina wa nabiyyina Maulānā Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in.